Now is Jonathan Fahey, former acting ICE director and former federal prosecutor. Thank you, sir, so much for joining us. First, I just want to get your thoughts on the response right now that we're seeing in Los Angeles. Folks in cars trying to get through on the 101 being stopped by protesters or rioters, depending on who the person is.
Yeah, what is happening here is really awful, and I think what makes it so awful is the conduct of both Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass on this, because they are taking the side of rioters, as you know, sort of bringing us back to 2020 BLM, and they're putting the public safety secondary to their political agenda, which is open borders. It is so shameful, and I think President Trump earlier talked about sort of the incompetence of Mayor Bass and Gavin Newsom, but it's so much worse than this. This is malevolence. They are not even trying to stop this. They're speaking out on behalf of the protesters and not supporting these officers that are simply doing their job. And I think one thing that's important to note, just because Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas refused to enforce immigration laws, that was their responsibility. Donald Trump is doing what he is required to do. It's not just simply a political decision. It's a requirement of his job. And this is so shameful. This shouldn't even be happening, but there is no support from the state and local, not the law enforcement, because I'm sure they're in line, but the state and local officials are not supporting federal law enforcement, and people are in danger because of it.
Jonathan, Guy Benson here. You used to direct ICE. You were the acting director of that agency, so you know what this work looks like and what it's supposed to be. Describe what ICE agents have been up to in this area of Southern California, and then describe the violence that has been directed at them by so many of these people.
Well, my understanding, this all happened when they were serving a warrant a few days ago, and again, a warrant issued by a federal judge to look into alien harboring, which is a very serious crime, as you all know. And so that's all started in reaction to that. And they, from my understanding, they have had things like, rocks thrown at them. They've been assaulted in other ways. And we've seen this from a lot of politicians. This is predictable. The rhetoric, referring to ICE agents as the Gestapo and things like that, this is the natural next step in all of this. And it's really scary because these are people that put their lives on the line to make us safer, and they should be able to expect the support of the local authorities against people like this. And unfortunately, they're not. And something really bad is probably going to happen, and it's going to be preventable. And because our local officials in Los Angeles, let's say the local officials in Los Angeles were doing nothing to stop this. So these people are put in danger. They're put in fear of their lives just simply doing their jobs, which is to deport illegal aliens. And when you see the people being deported, these are dangerous criminals. So they're making the community better by deporting them. And the Democratic Party, and this is the Democratic Party doing this, is fighting every single deportation because they have an open borders agenda. And the way to elevate yourself within that party is to be as far open borders as you can be.
Jonathan, from a political perspective, it's like watching Thelma and Louise at the end driving off that cliff from a political strategy perspective, because you look at polls showing 75 to 80% of Americans, right? So that doesn't mean Republicans or conservatives, but we're going into independents and even some Democrats support criminal deportations. Can you even get into the logic of all these Democrats, whether it be Gavin Newsom or Maxine Waters or the LA Mayor Karen Bass or Tim Walz or Kamala Harris? I could go down the line as far as why they are against this happening, because most of the American people want this to happen, yet they continue to jump into this quicksand and they don't want to change course. What do you make of that?
I think it actually makes sense because the Democratic Party is about 5% on this issue, but the way for them to elevate themselves within the party is to be completely radical on the issue. Yeah, it's crazy on the sort of the broader electoral sense because it isn't a popular issue, but their party is so out there on this issue that the only way they'll get any traction is to be for open borders against ICE. And the first person in the party that starts supporting ICE and supporting law enforcement, they're going to be cast aside in this party. This party's been so radical, and it's not just been recently. 2020, the anti-police wing of the party dominated, and BLM, they turned over policing to BLM in a lot of Democratic cities. But it makes sense, not for broader winning elections. It won't work there, but it will help elevate themselves. Tim Walz was, I would say politically dead, and now he's coming back by going down the Gestapo route and all these other things. And he's getting traction, and it's sad, it's pathetic, it's not in the interest of the American people in any respect, but they frankly don't care.
Jonathan, it's Lydia Hu. Thanks for your time this evening. I want to ask you about, I guess, kind of some legal questions that the Democratic governors are raising about President Trump's use of his authority to deploy the National Guard. I guess they're making a big deal about the president's use of sending federal resources over the governor's objection, saying that this is something that really the states should handle. And I just wonder, as a former federal prosecutor as well that you are, what you make of that issue, and where, does that have legs? Where could that really go? I mean, could they challenge President Trump's, use of federal resources here?
They can, but they're wrong. And it's kind of an irony to the whole thing, because they're saying that the states should handle it. And I think President Trump would be, the state should handle it, but clearly they're not. And in fact, they're supporting the rioters. But the president has, the governor has the authority, but the president also has the authority if rioters are getting in the way of the enforcement of federal law, which they are here, the immigration law. He has the absolute authority to do so. It's appropriate to do so. And I would say in this situation, it's a requirement to do so. His job is to keep these officers safe, to enforce federal law, and keep the community safe. And it's unfortunate that Gavin Newsom won't use his authority and won't use his influence, because he would rather, promote, again, this open borders agenda. And he couldn't care less about the citizens of Los Angeles or citizens of California, because the greater constituency, again, is this illegal alien pro-open border constituency. But yes, on the legal issues, President Trump is correct here. And it's unfortunate the local officials won't do their jobs.
Jonathan, bear with me here for just a second as I give just a little update, because I want to continue this conversation. We all do here. The Los Angeles Police Department Central Division, 13 minutes ago, posted the California Highway Patrol have entered the southbound lanes of the 101 freeway and are attempting to disperse the demonstrators off the freeway. Jonathan, I don't know if you can see your screen, but we are watching for any activity that comes out of that. At the same time, Governor Newsom's office sent a letter to Defense Secretary Hegseth himself, and in it they write, in dynamic and fluid situations such as the one in Los Angeles, state and local authorities are the most appropriate ones to evaluate the need for resources to safeguard life and property. Indeed, the decision to deploy the National Guard without appropriate training or orders risks seriously escalating the situation. Jonathan, all I can think about when I see some of the statements from the governor's office and the governor himself on X saying it's time for the National Guard troops to go home are the people who live in this area, the people who are trying to drive by on the 101, getting to wherever it is they want to go. And what would they think if they knew that the governor was saying, send the people who are here, sent by the president, to go home?
I would hope they'd be appalled. And what Gavin Newsom's doing is so cynical and so dishonest. Sort of this broader theme of what they're doing is like they're creating chaos and then try to blame Donald Trump for the chaos. But, he's right. The local authorities should deal with this, and they know how to deal with it, but he won't let them because of politics. If he turned it over and said, let local police deal with it and let them do their jobs, I bet they would do their jobs, but they're being prevented from doing so. But again, it's the deepest cynicism from Gavin Newsom that's so dishonest. It is breathtaking how bad it is. But, the president has a responsibility not only to ensure the federal law gets enforced, but also to protect these agents and protect the citizens. And when the state isn't going to do their job, he has to step in, unfortunately.
No, Jonathan, it strikes me that these rioters are opposed to any deportations of anyone ever, including the most dangerous illegal immigrant criminals in our society, and yet they want to stay in a country and let those criminals stay in a country that they apparently don't like very much, to put it mildly. And we're seeing law enforcement on our screen getting pelted again with objects and being screamed at. The prevalence, Jonathan, of foreign flags in this crowd, Mexican flags, Central American countries as well, it's a very interesting statement being made by these rioters as they hurl insults and objects at law enforcement, that they are doing so while carrying the banners of foreign countries where they apparently don't want to go back to.
Yeah, it's an interesting irony, and the only American flag that I saw in your clip was upside down. But it is funny, that is the standard Democratic Party position on immigration. They don't want anyone to be deported. I mean, they may occasionally say criminals, but if you look at it over the past few months, they basically have fought every deportation, whether it's a gang member, whether it's Tren de Aragua, whether it's somebody convicted of certain crimes, they will stand in the way to try to prevent it, to make it difficult, to stand in the way of ICE agents. And that's their standard move of the party. And it doesn't seem like they're relenting on this. And you would think, like Joe was saying, the common sense position would be, hey, let's at least deport the criminals and then maybe discuss the other people. But they won't fight anything. And they're just taking this radical position. But yeah, it is an interesting irony. We're not seeing a lot of American flags there and a lot of foreign flags. And how does that, come across to the American citizens that are not only, these people are already in the country, but a lot, in many respects, they are costing taxpayers enormous amounts of money. And to see this, it's really appalling. I think the average American is not going to be very pleased with this.
Jonathan, it's Joe Concha again. Andy Ngo is reporting, and this guy just gets into the toughest of situations as far as reporting, right in the middle of seemingly any unrest that happens throughout the country. He is reporting now that Antifa International has announced a June 8th direct action. So that is that today or is that tomorrow?
Today.
That's today. Okay. To attack the ICE facility in San Francisco. The planned riot is organized in support of the riots that are going on in Los Angeles. So is there a fear that this could spread to other cities like we saw with BLM in 2020?
That's what I think the plan is to make it so disruptive. And the Democrats, this was a very, in many ways, successful for them politically in 2020, just create so much chaos, so much misery, and then hopefully the media will carry their water and attribute it to Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to work this time. I think the American people have wised up to this game. But I do think this is probably going to be a broader movement of the Democratic Party because they are going to fight this everywhere. And I think until, we start seeing more people arrested and probably some of these city officials on things like sanctuary cities and things before this quells down. But I would expect they're gonna do this until maybe there'll be somebody in the Democratic Party, some cooler heads that will say, hey, this isn't working for us. But right now it does seem to be, we're going to see Antifa and other groups probably, getting involved, getting in on the act here.
Well, we are going to continue our coverage. And Jonathan Fahey, former acting ICE director, we want to thank you for walking us through this as we watch these incredible images on the screen. Again, Jonathan Fahey, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean.